A 40-year-old woman got pregnant for an 18-year-old boy. Karma, they said, hit her. Let me tell you a story. The Ohaneze family had never been rich, but they were comfortable. 8 people under one roof, 2 parents, 4 boys, and 2 girls. Life demanded discipline, but it was unpredictable. Laughter still echoed in the evenings when their father told stories and their mothers hummed while cooking. The father worked a stable job, while the mother ran a small provision that drew customers from 3 streets away. The children knew their roles. They believed hardship was something that happened to other families until everything collapsed. It started with a simple phone call on a quiet Tuesday morning. Their father was let go without warning. Budget cuts, they said. Restructuring. 20 years of service reduced to a handshake and a severance package that wouldn't last 3 months. The house felt very different that night. Dinner was quieter. Their mother's hand trembled silently as she served the rice. "We'll manage," she said. But her voice carried no conviction. For a few weeks, they did manage. The store became their lifeline. Their mother worked longer hours, adjusted prices. The older children took on more responsibilities. Ken, 15 and the second oldest, started waking at 5 a.m. to help his mother prepare for the day. Then came the fire. No one knows exactly how it started. Faulty wiring, someone said. A candle left burning, another whispered. But it didn't matter. By the time neighbors formed a bucket chain, the store was ash. Years of inventory, customer credit book, savings in a metal box hidden, all gone. Their mother stood in the ruins the next morning, staring at nothing. She didn't cry. She just couldn't. And that was what frightened the children the most. 3 weeks after the fire, the youngest daughter, Chinonso, was hit by a speeding motorcycle on her way to fetch water. She died before reaching the hospital, and she was just 9 years old. The funeral broke them, not just financially, although it drained what little savings remained, but it drained them spiritually the most. Their father stopped speaking in full sentences. Their mother aged a decade in a month. The surviving children moved through the house like ghosts, afraid to make a noise, afraid to ask for anything. Bills arrived like clockwork. Rent, electricity, water. School administrators sent warning letters. It was like their village people opened their calabash and chanted their names in it. The older children were asked to leave class until fees were paid. Relatives who once visited frequently suddenly had urgent commitments elsewhere. Hunger returned, not the kind that comes from skipping a snack, but the kind that hollows you out from the inside. Meals became strategic, 101. Gari in the morning, watery soup in the evening, nothing in between. The younger ones cried at night, the older ones learned to sleep through it. One evening, the parents called a family meeting to talk about our options, their father said. The children sat in a semicircle, waiting. Their mother wouldn't meet their eyes. "There's someone who can help," she finally said. "Auntie B, you remember her? She came to Chinonso's funeral." A few heads nodded. Auntie B was a distant relative, successful, well-dressed, always arriving in expensive cars. She lived in the big city, owned properties, and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had escaped poverty and never looked back. They thought she was the right choice, but wait and find out how things turned. "She's offered to take one of you," their mother continued, her voice cracked. "To live with her, to give you opportunities we can't provide right now." The silence was suffocating. "Just until we get back on our feet," their father added quickly. "Just for a while." But everyone in the room understood the unspoken truth. Back on our feet was just a dream, not a plan. The question hung in the air. Who would go? Their mother looked at Ken, poor Ken. He was just 15, strong for his age, quiet, obedient. He never complained when asked to do extra chores. He shared his food without being asked. When Chinonso died, he was the one who held his younger siblings while they cried, even though his own grief was suffocating. The parents told themselves that's why he was the best choice, because he would understand, because he was mature at 15, because he could handle it. They didn't say, because we can't afford to keep all of you. They didn't say, because you're too strong. You're strong enough to survive what we're about to do to you. Ken didn't protest. He saw the desperation in his parents' eyes. He heard his siblings' empty stomachs rumble at night. He understood that love in this moment meant sacrifice. "I'll go," he said. His mother wept. His father looked away. That night, Ken lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering what kind of life left for him in the city. He had no idea. The city swallowed him whole. The city was noise and motion and 1,000 strangers moving in every direction. Auntie B picked him up in his sleek car that smelled like leather and expensive perfume. She smiled warmly and asked about the family, told him how lucky he was. Her house was enormous, 3 stories, marble floors, chandelier that cost more than his family's annual rent. For a moment, Ken felt hope. Maybe this would be opportunity. This would be different. This was the opportunity his parents had promised. Then the car disappeared, the gates closed, and Auntie B's smile vanished. "Let me make something clear," she said, her voice suddenly cold. "You're here because I'm doing your family a favor, a very expensive favor. You will earn your keep. You will not embarrass me. You will not complain. Do you understand? Do we understand each other?" Ken nodded, though he didn't fully understand yet. Everything was yet to unfold. He would soon. Ken's days started at 5 a.m. It felt like the usual. He cleaned the house, 3 floors, 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms. He cooked breakfast, washed Auntie B's cars, ran errands, buying groceries, paying bills, delivering envelopes to people who never looked him in the eye. When guests arrived, he served them silently and vanished the moment his tasks were complete. There was no school even. When Ken asked about enrollment, Auntie B laughed. "School? For what? You think your family sent you here to read books? They sent you here because they couldn't feed you. Don't forget that." She said it casually, like stating the weather, but the words burrowed deep. Phone calls home were monitored. Letters were read before being sent. Slowly, Ken realized he wasn't being raised. He was being used. And when he made mistakes, burned rice, forgot to lock the gates, spoke too loudly, the punishments were swift and humiliating. But he endured. Because enduring meant his siblings could eat. Enduring meant the family would survive. At least, that's what he told himself. It started small. Everything suddenly changed. Auntie B started asking him to massage her shoulders after long days. Her hands lingered too long on his arm. She started making comments about how much he had grown, how strong he looked. Ken felt very uncomfortable, but didn't know how to name it. He tried to create distance, tried finishing his tasks early, tried avoiding being alone with her. But the house was hers. There was nowhere to hide. One night, everything suddenly turned left. That night, she called him to her room. She had never let him stay in her room for too long, except he was cleaning. But things changed. This night was different. "Ken, my boy." "How was your day now? I'm sure you're tired. Have you eaten? Come lay with me." Ken looked stunned. She had never asked how his day went, or if he was tired. She didn't even care if he had had a proper meal. "Come lie with me, my boy," she repeated. Ken simply obeyed, not like he had a choice. But something strange happened. Auntie B started touching him in places no one should. "Auntie B, please stop," Ken pleaded. But she paid no heed. "You're a man, Ken. I just want to show you a little bit of what you enjoy as a man." "Auntie B, please." Ken began crying, but Auntie B paid deaf ears. "You're not a child. Stop that foolish act," Auntie B cautioned. "Just stay still. You'll like it. Trust your auntie." But Ken kept on crying and pleading. "Just the tip," she said, hopping on Ken. Ken felt his life tear apart. He cried through the activity Auntie B tagged an initiation into manhood. When she was done, she said, "If I hear this outside, your family would suffer. Get out of my room. Ken stood up, looking at her with tears in his eyes. He had heard of things like this while in the village, but never believed it could happen to a guy. He never believed it could happen to him. His body was used without his consent. His pleas were ignored. His tears meant nothing. Afterward, Auntie B handed him an envelope filled with cash. Send this home, she said. Your family needs it. Ken sat alone in the bathroom that night, staring at the money, feeling like his soul had been traded for bills he didn't choose. It happened again, and again, and again. Every night even. Each time Ken tried to resist. Each time Auntie B reminded him of his family situation. Each time she handed him money to send home after she was satisfied. And the money worked. His siblings returned to school. His mother reopened a smaller store. His father found part-time work. When Ken called home, he heard relief in their voices. Gratitude, in fact. You're saving us, his mother said. Ken wanted to scream. He wanted to tell them the truth, but he could not. How could he? They were drowning, and he was the rope that they clung to. Letting go meant watching everybody sink. So he stayed quiet. He learned to separate his body from his mind. During the assault, he learned to bury his shame so deep he could almost forget it existed. He learned that survival sometimes means swallowing poison and calling it medicine. For 3 years, 3 good years, this was his life. Poor Ken. Until one day, karma came. Auntie B became ill. It started with nausea, fatigue, doctor's visits that became more frequent. Eventually, the truth emerged. She was pregnant. The shock was immediate. Behind the scenes, more truth surfaced. She had terminated pregnancies before. Quietly, discreetly. But this time, the doctor issued a stark warning. Another termination could kill her. The pregnancy had to stay. For the first time, Auntie B was afraid. Not of the pregnancy itself, but of what it represented. Evidence, questions, exposure. People would want to know who the father was. Rumors would spread. Her reputation, carefully built over decades, could crumble. And Ken, he was no longer just an asset. He was a witness, a liability, a threat in fact. Auntie B considered her options. She could send Ken away back to his family, far away from the big city, out of sight. But what if he talked? What if someone asked questions he couldn't avoid answering? She could silence him permanently. The thought crossed her mind more than once. The big city was a city where people disappeared, but that carried its own risks. Investigations, suspicions, her name attached to something unforgivable. She could rewrite the narrative entirely. Claim the child was someone else's. Invent an imaginary boyfriend who had left the country. Play the victim herself. But every plan had a hole. Every solution created new problems. Ken sensed the shift. He saw how she looked at him now, not with entitlement, but with fear. He understood something terrifying. For the first time, she saw him as dangerous. And in that realization, Ken found something he'd lost years ago, a sense of power. For 3 years, Ken had survived being invincible, obedient, silent even. But silence, he realized, was his choice. And he'd been making it every day. He began documenting, writing down dates, times, details he had tried to forget. He found the envelopes Auntie B had given him over the years and kept them as evidence. He recorded conversations when she wasn't paying attention. He didn't have a plan yet, just the beginning of one, just the raw materials of truth waiting to be weaponized. One evening, Auntie B summoned him to her room. She looked smaller than usual, exhausted, her confidence cracked. "We need to talk," she said. Ken didn't sit. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed. For the first time in 3 years, he looked her directly in her eyes. "I'm listening," he said. And in that moment, she understood. The boy she'd broken had learned to rebuild himself from the pieces, and Tibi tried to bargain. She offered money more than before. She promised to send him abroad, to even give him a fresh start, to pay for his education anywhere he wanted. "Just don't tell anyone," she said, "please." Ken listened in silence. Then he spoke. "I want you to write a letter to my family, explaining everything." Her face went pale. "Ken, you don't understand what that would." "I understand perfectly," he interrupted. "You've spent 3 years reminding me that my family depended on you, that they need your help, that I owe you everything." He stepped closer. "But they don't owe you anything, and neither do I." Auntie B's hand trembled. "If you tell them, they'll suffer. Your siblings will lose their school fees. Your mother's store will close. Your family will fall apart." Ken's jaw tightened. She was right, and she knew it. "So what do you want?" she whispered. "I want you to leave my family alone," Ken said. "Stop sending money. Stop calling. Disappear from our lives. And in exchange, your secret stays with me for now." It wasn't justice. It wasn't even revenge. But it was survival on his own terms. 2 weeks later, Ken left the big city. Auntie B arranged transportation, a bus ticket, some cash, a final envelope he refused to open. They didn't speak during his departure. There was no goodbyes, no apology, just silence and the understanding that their toxic agreement had ended finally. The bus ride home took 8 hours. Ken stared out the window, watching the city fade into countryside, then villages, then the final roads of his childhood. He felt hollow, not free exactly, but lighter. Like he'd been carrying a weight so long he'd forgotten what his own body felt like without it. When the bus finally pulled into the station, his family was waiting. His mother cried. His father gripped his shoulders. His siblings swarmed him with questions. "Why are you back? Did something happen? Is Auntie B okay?" Ken looked at their faces, thinner than he remembered, worn by years of hardship, and understood that the truth would destroy them. So he lied. "She said I should come home, that I've done enough." His home wasn't what Ken remembered. The house felt smaller. The neighborhood looked shabbier. His siblings had grown physically, emotionally, in ways that excluded him from their shared experience. He was a stranger in his own family. At night, he lay awake, listening to his parents argue in the next room. Auntie B stopped sending money. His mother said, "I don't understand. Did something happen with Ken? Maybe she's just done helping." His father replied, but doubt crept into his voice. Days passed. Weeks. Ken tried to reintegrate helping with chores, reconnecting with siblings, pretending the last 3 years hadn't fundamentally changed him. But he couldn't sleep in the dark anymore, couldn't stand being touched unexpectedly. He flinched when someone raised their voice. His mother noticed. "Ken, what happened in Lagos?" He wanted to tell, wanted to scream the truth until it stopped burning inside. Instead, he said, "Nothing. I'm just tired." She didn't believe him, but she didn't push. Silence had become the family's native language. Ken's younger brother, Chidi, found the notebook by accident. He was looking for a pencil in Ken's bag when he saw it, pages and pages of dates, names, details, written in cramped, desperate handwriting. At first, Chidi didn't understand what he was reading. Then he did. He confronted Ken that evening, away from the others. "Is this true?" Chidi demanded, his voice shaking. "Did Auntie B, did she do this to you?" Ken's silence was answer enough. Chidi's face twisted with rage. "We have to tell someone, the police, our parents, anybody, somebody." "No," Ken said flatly. "What do you mean no? She's a criminal." "She's also the reason you went to school," Ken interrupted. "The reason Mama's store reopened. The reason we ate for 3 years. That doesn't make it okay." "I know," Ken said quietly. But it makes it complicated. Chidi stared at his older brother, struggling to reconcile the Ken he'd known with the person standing before him, someone who had been hollowed out and rebuilt into something harder, colder. "So what do we do?" Chidi whispered. "We survive," Ken said, "like we always do." Ken's mother couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She replayed conversations in her head, searching for clues. Ken's reluctance to talk about the big city. His nightmares, the way he flinched when she touched his shoulder. One evening, she found him sitting alone in the backyard, staring at nothing. "Ken," she said softly, "I need you to be honest with me. What happened at Auntie B's house?" He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the guilt already forming in her eyes. She knew. Maybe not in details, but enough. "Why did you send me?" he asked. The question hung between them like a blade. "We had no choice, my son," she said, her voice breaking. "We were drowning, Ken. We couldn't feed you, couldn't keep you in school, so we had to think of a solution." "You thought it would be easier if I disappeared," he said. Not angry, just tired. "No, my dear. We thought Auntie B would take care of you. That She did," Ken interrupted bitterly. "Just not the way you imagined." His mother's face crumpled. "What did she do to you?" Ken wanted to tell her, but he also wanted to protect her from the weight of knowing, because once she knew, she would have to live with it. The guilt would consume her. Maybe that was justice, or maybe it was just cruelty. "It doesn't matter anymore," he said, finally. "I'm home." But they both knew that wasn't true. In the big city, Auntie B's pregnancy progressed. She hired a live-in maid to replace Ken. She avoided social gatherings where questions might arise. She constructed elaborate stories about a boyfriend who worked overseas, who would be returning soon. But the lies felt thinner every day. Her friends whispered. Business associates noticed her absence. Rumors began to circulate. Nothing concrete, just speculations. But speculations, they say, are dangerous. One night, laying awake, she thought about Ken. Did he hate her? Was he planning revenge? Would he one day show up with evidence, with accusations, with the truth? She'd spent years teaching him that silence could be bought. But she had also taught him that power came from controlling the narrative. And now, he controlled hers. The pregnancy she had once feared became her only focus. At least the child was something she could control, something that belonged to her. But in quiet moments, she wondered, what would she tell this child about their father? What lie could she invent that wouldn't eventually unravel? Ken's father was the last to understand. He didn't convince himself that sending Ken away was a practical decision, a temporary solution. He had convinced that Auntie B was family, that family took care of each other. But the pieces were adding up. Ken's return, the sudden end of financial support, his son's haunted eyes. One evening, drunk on cheap gin, he cornered Ken. Tell me the truth. What happened in the big city? Ken stared at his father. This man who'd once seemed invincible, now broken by poverty and bad decisions. You really want to know? Ken asked. His father nodded. So Ken told him, not everything, but enough. When he finished, his father sat in silence for a very long time. Then he stood, walked outside, and vomited in the backyard. He didn't come back inside for hours. The next morning, he looked 10 years older. He couldn't meet Ken's eyes, couldn't meet his wife's eyes, couldn't look at any of his children without seeing the consequences of his choices. I failed you, he said to Ken. Ken didn't disagree. The family sat for the first time in years, all of them. Parents, siblings, Ken at the corner. We need to talk about what happened, their mother said. The younger children didn't understand at first. Their parents explained that Ken had been hurt while living with Auntie B, that the help they had received had come at a terrible cost. Why didn't you tell us? One sibling asked. Ken laughed. His laugh was bitter. And say what? That your school fees was paid with my suffering? That Mama's store reopened because I endured hell? We didn't know, their mother whispered. You didn't want to know, Ken shot back. You were so desperate to survive that you didn't ask questions. You just took the money and told yourself that I was fine. It wasn't entirely fair, but it wasn't entirely wrong either. Their father spoke, his voice hollow. What do we do now? Now? Ken looked around the room. Now we'll live with it. All of us. Because that's what families do. Chidi couldn't let it go. While the rest of the family tried to move forward, he obsessed over revenge. He researched laws, contacted lawyers, learned about statutes of limitations and evidence requirements. We can report her, he told Ken. We have your testimony. We have the notebook. We can make her pay. Ken shook his head. It's not that simple. Why not? She's a monster. She's also powerful, Ken said. She has money, connections, lawyers. What do we have? The word of a poor boy from a desperate family? Who do you think people would believe? Chidi's fist clenched. So she just gets away with it? She's pregnant with evidence of her crime, Ken pointed out. She's living with consequences too. Just not the ones you want. But Chidi couldn't accept that. Couldn't accept that justice was this messy, this incomplete. So he did something reckless. He sent an anonymous letter to several Lagos newspapers detailing accusations against a prominent businesswoman who had abused a minor in her care. He didn't use names, but he included enough detail that anyone who knew Auntie B might recognize her. Ken found out too late to stop him. The letter sparked a frenzy. Bloggers picked it up. Twitter users began speculating. Someone created a trend listing suspicious businesswomen in Lagos who fit the description. Auntie B's name appeared on multiple lists. She hired lawyers immediately, threatened defamation suits, issued carefully worded statements denying business accusation. But the internet doesn't care about denials. It cares about drama. Reporters began digging. Former employees were interviewed. Neighbors were questioned. Old rumors resurfaced. Whispers about other young people who had lived with Auntie B and mysteriously disappeared. Ken watched the chaos from his village, terrified and fascinated. Chidi was triumphant. See? People are listening. She can't hide anymore. But Ken understood what his brothers didn't. Exposure without evidence was just noise. And noise could hurt them as much as it hurt Auntie B. But sure enough, within days, counter-narrative emerged. Auntie B's supporters painted her as a generous woman being attacked by jealous enemies. They suggested the letters were a shakedown attempt. Without Ken coming forward, without concrete proof, the story began to lose momentum. You need to speak up, Chidi urged. Tell your story publicly. Nothing will happen and destroy our family in the process, Ken replied. Make us targets? Put Mama and Papa through a public trial? Chidi had no answer. Ken faced an impossible choice. Stay silent and let Auntie B escape consequences, but protect his family from scrutiny, judgment, and potential retaliation. Or speak publicly, tell his truth, and risk everything: his family's safety, their reputation, their fragile stability. There was no right answer. He consulted a lawyer who worked pro bono for abuse survivors. She was honest. Your case is strong emotionally, but legally, without physical evidence, without contemporaneous reports, without witnesses, it's your word against hers. And she has resources to drag this out for years. So I just give up? Ken asked. I'm not saying that, she replied gently. I'm saying you need to understand what you're signing up for. Public trials with traumatized survivors. Media attention is brutal, and even if you win, the victory might feel hollow. Ken spent sleepless nights wrestling with the decision. He thought about other boys who might end up in Auntie B's house, other families desperate enough to ignore red flags. He thought about his own siblings who would have to live with the stigma of being that family if he went public. He thought about himself, already broken, already struggling to rebuild. Could he survive being broken again in public? In the end, Ken made a choice that satisfied no one. He didn't go public with his full story, didn't give interviews or name Auntie B directly, but he did write an anonymous essay, detailed, unflinching, impossible to ignore, and submitted it to a major online platform that published survivor stories. He described what happened without naming his abusers. He wrote about poverty and desperation and the way his family sacrificed children while calling it love. He wrote about shame, survival, and the long, painful road to reclaiming your humanity. The essay went viral. Thousands shared it. Survivors reached out with their own stories. Organizations dedicated to child protection cited it in their campaigns. Auntie B read it and knew it was about her, but she couldn't prove it, couldn't sue, couldn't silence it. She lived the rest of her pregnancy in paranoia, wondering who else knew, who else was watching, who else might come forward. Kent's family read it too. They didn't know he had written it, not at first, but they recognized pieces of their story in his words. His mother cried for days. His father stopped drinking. His siblings looked at him differently, with new understanding, new respect, new grief. Chidi asked, "Are you okay with this? With not getting full justice?" Ken thought about it. "Justice would require someone to give me back 3 years of my life," he said. "Since that's impossible, I'll just settle with surviving, for healing, for making sure other people understand what desperation can cost." It wasn't the ending anyone wanted, but it was the ending they got. This is the end of the story of Ken and his family. Unfortunately, Auntie B got let go easy. No punishment. But that's just how the world is sometimes. Ken had to protect his peace. He had to protect his future. He had to go for healing instead of justice that could cost him his entire lifetime and the stigma of being tagged that boy. Thank you, besties, for watching. If you want more tales like this, you could drop a comment on the kind of story you want, and maybe, just maybe, I could write a story about it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. It shows you love and support us. Well, besties, until the next tale. See you.